We have exciting quarterback matchups between Dak Prescott versus Jared Goff and Josh Allen versus Joe Burrow this week. And each of those four have made it into our top 6 rankings. We dig into our full quarterback fantasy rankings for week 14 on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Fantasy Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcasting network. I am one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL, fantasy, and betting for sportingnews.com.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Today, we are starting our positional rankings for Week 14, starting with quarterbacks and tight ends on today's show. We'll get to running backs and wide receivers tomorrow and on Thursday. Starting right at the top here for quarterback, Dak Prescott and Jared Goff are right at the top of our list. I have Dak Prescott at number 1. You have him at 2. I have Goff at 3. You have him at 4. We both have Josh Allen up there as well. You have Allen at 1. I have him at 2. And you have Jalen Hurts ahead of Goff. So that's the only difference there between us. But Dak Prescott and Jared Goff on Thursday Night Football in this matchup in Detroit, in a dome. Like, this should be a very, very high-scoring game. We know how bad the Cowboys are on defense against quarterbacks, but also the Lions have allowed the 4th most points per game to quarterbacks as well. So both of these guys should have monster games.
Yeah, nothing needs to give for Dak Prescott. We just saw Jameis Winston go up to Detroit and have a big game. I don't know if Dak's going to have a receiving touchdown in this one, but he should have at least 3 passing touchdowns, I would think, here. The way CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens are playing, the secondary is beat up. Terry and Arnold is hurt. There's a little bit concerned with Jared Goff, only because Amon-Ra St. Brown is not likely to play in this game with his low ankle sprain, and there's no Sam Laporta, but we know Jameson Williams can have a big game in this one. We'll probably see Isaac Tesla have a big game. And, of course, they can throw a short pass to Jahmyr Gibbs, and he can run through the entire Cowboys defense. So there are plenty of weapons on both sides. The pass defenses stink still on the back end. The Cowboys still struggle there to cover and look a little bit more challenging for the Lions without Laporta and St. Brown, but it'll still get done. But Dak, no issues whatsoever. He's creeping into the MVP conversation, by the way. George Pickens, the kind of year he's having, Michelle, you don't want to hear this. I think he has more receiving yards and touchdowns than the entire Steelers receiving core.
He does.
So he's having a big year right now with Lamb, and they've made Dak in this offense almost look unstoppable of late. If there's a reason this team gets to the playoffs, it's going to be because of this offense. So, look, the Lions are reeling. The Cowboys coming hot. I do like this matchup a lot for both teams to put up a ton of points in this one. Great start to a very critical Week 14.
It really is. And then we have another amazing matchup that we're excited to watch on Sunday. Josh Allen versus Joe Burrow. I have Allen at 2. You have him at 1. I have Burrow at 4. You have him at 6, just behind. You have behind Hurts at 3, Goff at 4, Stafford at 5, which I also have Stafford at 5. And then that's where you have Joe Burrow there at 6. But both of these guys should have big games as well. The Bills have been stingy against quarterbacks this year, 2nd fewest points per game to quarterbacks. But here are 8 of the quarterbacks they faced out of 12. Tua twice, Justin Fields, Spencer Rattler, Michael Penix Jr., Bryce Young, Davis Mills, and Aaron Rodgers / Mason Rudolph, right? So 8 of their 12 games have been against very bad fantasy quarterbacks. So I'm not going to say they can't allow big games to quarterbacks this year. Burrow has scored over 20 points in both of his career games versus Sean McDermott's defense. And, he came back right away last week and scored 19 points. So we know Allen is in that Bills offense is going to put up a lot of points against that Bengals defense. Burrow's going to have to throw a lot.
Yeah, the Bengals are the worst against the run, so that could mean a lot of James Cook. It could be very similar to the Steelers game last week where you don't see a big passing total from Josh Allen, but he gets it done on the ground. Maybe he does it through touchdowns, playing off Cook. Cook should have a monster game with Allen against his Bengals defense. On the other side, yeah, Joe Burrow's been very comfortable against the Bills. The good news is he should get T. Higgins back. A short week, you can play with a concussion. Now he's had a few extra days of rest, so we're presuming he can return. I know it was a pretty bad concussion, but getting that time off, the little mini bye, should get him back on the field. Chase Brown also has a really good matchup in this one, out of the backfield, catching passes. He's been huge, running, setting up the passing downfield to Jamar Chase and all the other weapons. So, yeah, for some reason, Burrow plays the Bills really well, no matter who they put out there for this defense. I know the defense has come on strong. You got Joey Bosa making some plays here. So there might be some turnovers with that Joe Burrow stuff, some sacks that you're going to have to accept. But in the end, I think he'll compile because, again, the Bills definitely should score almost at will on the Bengals. That should throw Joe Burrow for high volume in this game.
Now, like I mentioned, we both had Stafford at our quarterback 5. It was a bad week last week with those interceptions and just couldn't get it going. But we think he'll bounce back against the Cardinals. At 6, I had Jalen Hurts. Like I mentioned, you had him a little bit higher at number 3. It's a little scary of a matchup against the Chargers, but you're not going to consider sitting Hurts. But then after that, your quarterback 7 through 10 get very, very interesting. You have Jordan Love at 7 against the Bears, Daniel Jones at 8 against the Jaguars, Trevor Lawrence at 9 against the Colts, and Bo Nix at 10 against the Raiders. I don't have any of those guys inside my top 10. Now, I'm not too much lower on Bo Nix and Trevor Lawrence. I have Nix at 12, Lawrence at 13, and then I guess Jordan Love at 14. So the one we're really different on here is Daniel Jones. But tell me why you're so high on all 3 of those guys.
Yeah, starting with Jordan Love, I mean, it's pretty obvious. He's actually crept into the odds in MVP, believe it or not, with Dak Prescott behind Matthew Stafford, and now Drake May is probably the leader. So when you look at that, yeah, I think Jordan Love is starting to play well. I think he's starting to see his receiving core all come together. Christian Watson's return has been pretty huge. Last week was Dontavian Wicks. The Bears will struggle to cover Christian Watson. He is the exact profile they do not do well against. Big, strong, speedy guys all the way through the red zone. And you can't run on the Bears so easily either. So Josh Jacobs will be contained. And we figure the Bears are also going to come in competitive, right? So Jordan Love's going to have to put the ball up in the air. He's a streaky quarterback, and I think that was good last week to get on a bit of a streak against the Lions. He was very good against them last week. Again, the Bears' pass defense, they allow a lot to quarterbacks here, so I'm pretty okay with Jordan Love having a nice game, especially with the run bottled up. Now, looking at Daniel Jones and Trevor Lawrence, I think this is the other shootout of the week. We have Prescott versus Goff. We've got the obvious Allen versus Burrow, but this one I think could also be ridiculously high scoring because these pass defenses have flaws that play into the hands of the other team, right? The Jaguars cannot cover the tight end. That's going to be good for Tyler Warren. They can't cover guys getting downfield. That's good for Alec Pierce. They have sometimes trouble with big slot. That could be trouble against Michael Pittman. And the other side, I think you look at the weapons, like Brenton Strange could be a big factor. Now you got 3 receivers all of a sudden. Trevor Lawrence back-to-back multiple touchdown games for him, the first time in a long time. So he's starting to put it together. I think it's going to be a high-scoring game. It's going to be a lot of fun, and both of these teams are decent against the run. So that's why I'm up there with those guys. Bo Nix, look, the ceiling is relatively low, but he has owned the Raiders in a short period of time in his career. I know it's only 2 years, but he's had his biggest games against them. So that's what I'm looking at with Jones, Lawrence, Nix, and, of course, Love leading the group at 7.
And then with, I get all that. All of them are scary, right? But at this point, this is where you get to a lot of hard, you get to a lot of hard matchups this week for these guys, or just a lot of inconsistent players, or some hurt players like Herbert and Jaden Daniels. Like if Jaden Daniels comes back, we both just throw him in. I have him at quarterback 8 at Minnesota. You have him at 11. I still like Baker, but he's banged up and hasn't been as good. I have him at 7. You're lower at 15. Lamar Jackson, I mean, we're much lower on him this week than normal. I have him at 9. You have him at 14. You're probably better. Like at 14 probably makes more sense. I'm probably still too high because he's just been so bad. I don't know if it's injuries or what, but he's the quarterback 15 on average this year, averaging just 17 points per game. The Steelers have allowed the 8th most points per game, but he's faced the Jets and the Bengals the last 2 weeks, and they scored 7 points and 6.5 points. So very nerve-wracking to throw him in your lineup still. But we're going to talk about some other guys, some guys that have tougher matchups, some sleeper guys. We'll get into the rest of the quarterbacks and then our tight ends right after a quick break.
All right, this episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. NFL Sundays move fast. One big play and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. Now, forget about Sunday. We have a huge game to already get into on Thursday. It's a big Sunday in general. We got the Bills Bengals, we've got the Jaguars Colts, we got Steelers Ravens, we got Packers Bears. What a big weekend of rivalry games. But don't forget about the Lions and Cowboys. And right now on FanDuel Sportsbook, you'll find that the Cowboys are 3-point underdogs. I actually like them to go into Detroit and win the way the Lions are playing right now. 54.5 is the total. I like that game to go over as well. So check out all the odds that FanDuel have for NFL Sunday. And with FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is the best when the game starts to shift. Receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, or the momentum flips after turnover. FanDuel lets you jump the moment. Players, props that are fun to play, and they update as guys hit you up. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action of the season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long, starting in week 14 all the way through week 18, the playoffs, only on FanDuel. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. All right, Michelle, it is time to continue the show. So, yeah, Lamar Jackson, yeah, that's one guy we're worried about based on the play and a little bit of the defensive matchup. But one guy we're worried about because of the matchup mainly is Pat Mahomes. And he plays the Texans defense at home. Now, Daniel Jones actually produced and had a decent start against that defense just now. It wasn't spectacular, right? It had a limited ceiling. I mean, it was like 20 points if you get the 6 points for the passing touchdowns. Otherwise, it was 18 points in that game. So it wasn't spectacular. We're not expecting spectacular, but is Mahomes someone we have to worry about? And look, I faded him all the way down to 13. Do you think he's a guy that you can have any confidence playing this week because this matchup?
Yeah, if you're in a 6-point touchdown league for a passing touchdown, it makes it a little bit easier to trust him because I could see him throwing a touchdown or two. With Daniel Jones, like last week, if you're in a 4-point league, it's only 16 fantasy points. That's kind of where I think Mahomes' ceiling is at this week. We just saw him in a really tough matchup against the Broncos a couple weeks ago. That was only 13 points he scored against the Bills, who are a tough defense against quarterbacks, only 10 points. Against the Colts, he even only put up 17 points. So, like, yeah, he had a monster game against the Cowboys last week, but everyone does. And the Texans are the toughest team against quarterbacks this year. And so I have him at 11. Like, I still have him as a playable guy because, like I said, maybe he can get 16 points, and I'm scared of these other guys behind him. But I'm not excited to play him this week, and you have him at 13.
Yeah, I'm at 13. I have Lamar at 14. And look, these guys would be lower, but we don't have Jackson Dart, Drake May, or Brock Purdy in the mix this week. So that's why they have to be a little bit higher, even with the bad matchups. And look, it's very hard to say Mahomes and Jackson are not startable, but I think you can fade them in relation to other quarterbacks based on matchups and based on what we've seen, right? The evidence is there with Jackson, even in good matchups the past couple of weeks. With Mahomes, look, it's a grind. I mean, the Texans just don't allow a lot. I mean, most of the Texans games are like 17-14, 20-17, 20-16. That doesn't allow you for a lot of fantasy points, right? Especially if you have a runner get a rushing touchdown, then it's really low ceiling there for Mahomes. So again, I would fade. I'm not going to say you're going to have to even think about CJ Stroud in this one, but I just think it's a tough matchup for the quarterbacks, and I want to avoid really exposure to this game as much as possible.
Now, one guy I like more than Patrick Mahomes, and maybe, I mean, I have him one spot behind Lamar Jackson, but I might even get crazy and flip that over. But I do like him more than guys like Bo Nix and Trevor Lawrence and Jordan Love and Daniel Jones. It's Jacoby Brissett, because in every game he started this year, which has now been a decent sample size of 7 games, he has scored at least 18.7 fantasy points. And that's in a 4-point, league for passing touchdowns. So he has been highly consistent. Now, he doesn't have a super high ceiling. He's never scored more than 24 points, but never scoring fewer than 18.6 is great, right? Like, to get anywhere in that range, starting Jacoby Brissett and knowing what you're going to get feels good. And yeah, the Rams might seem like a tougher matchup, but so was he played at the Seahawks, scored 19 points. He played against the Packers, scored 19 points. So Brissett is averaging 20.7 points per game as a starter this year. That's fourth among quarterbacks with at least 3 starts, behind only Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, and Jackson Dart. He's just been a reliable guy with all the passing he has to do. We expect the Rams to be able to put up points on the Cardinals defense. And we just saw Bryce Young put up 3 touchdowns against the Rams. So I'm not worried about this matchup. And I think Jacoby Brissett should be started.
Yeah, I do have a concern that the wheels could come off at any time. I've been at 16. I'm just a little afraid, right? I think he has a little bit more volatility than we think. I know the receivers are good, but you could look at it this way. The Rams could be a little bit vulnerable now based on what Bryce Young did, or they could come out flying knowing that they didn't play great defense last week and start to make bigger plays in this one and kind of show their true colors. So it's hard for me to totally trust Jacoby Brissett, especially with Marvin Harrison banged up again, but he's found it with Michael Wilson. He's found it with Trey McBride. So he's the classic, our team stinks. We're going to have to throw a lot. And the volume is going to add up to something in garbage time. At least he compiles, right? You see some guys like Cam Ward and Geno Smith. They don't really compile the way you want, but Brissett is a compiler. So I can see starting him this week. Like, I don't think it's nuts if you want to put him in over Mahomes or Jackson this week. It is not. Take the names off the back, go for the production.
And then a couple guys who have been struggling lately, Justin Herbert and Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams had a nice game against the Steelers in week 12, but sandwiched in between that game was 2 bad games against the Vikings and the Eagles. Now that's because they've been running all over the place, right? And now he has to go play at Green Bay. That's not really a team I want to play my fantasy quarterback against, especially one as inconsistent as Caleb Williams in fantasy production. And then Justin Herbert. Now he has a left hand fracture. He says he expects to play on Monday Night Football. The Eagles aren't like the toughest team to play against, but they're middle of the pack. But the last 3 weeks for Herbert have been really bad fantasy production as well. So I don't want to trust either Herbert or Caleb Williams, but if you had to go with one of those guys, who would you go with?
Yeah, this is a really tough call for me, like between those two. Like, I think I go with Herbert only because he can manufacture more with his weapons. Like, I don't think it's a terrible matchup for Ladd McConkey, Quentin Johnson. I don't think it's very good at all for Keenan Allen and Oronde Gadsden. So he's going to have to do it on the outside, and maybe the Eagles can put up some points. But that's what we've been counting on in a lot of weeks, and the Eagles are not creating much opportunity for shootouts here. But it also depends, right? Does Amari and Hampton come back? Then you'd figure it might be a lot of Vidal and Hampton trying to run over the Eagles, try to recreate what Swift and Monangai did last week. So there's all these variables, plus the hand injury. Like, there's some volatility, but it's Justin Herbert. It seems like every time you totally feel, oh, big game, come for Justin Herbert against the Jaguars, he disappoints. Every time we're worried about Justin Herbert, then he starts to play well. That's why he's so frustrating in fantasy. With Caleb Williams, I just think you got a limited upside. I think the Bears have found the running game. You can stick with that and run on the Packers. The Packers are a tough pass defense, definitely on the road. So, again, at least Justin Herbert is not playing in the elements either. I don't know what the weather is going to be like in Green Bay, but that also is another chip in his favor.
Now, let's say you have to get deep here. You have a guy in bye, they're injured, or you're in a 2-quarterback league. Who would you rather go with? Sam Darnold against the Falcons, which Sam Darnold has been pretty atrocious for fantasy in most of the games since week 7, outside of that week 9 game against the Commanders, and he was okay against the Titans. Or JJ McCarthy, who started off pretty solid as a fantasy quarterback, but it's completely fallen off. But he gets the Commanders this week if he's back with the concussion. Or would you get crazy with Shootout Sanders against the Titans, who have been allowing the 10th most points per game to quarterbacks? But Sanders has scored 10 fantasy points in both of his first 2 starts. Rank those guys for me: Darnold, McCarthy, or Shootout Sanders.
Oh man, I might actually have to make this decision because I just realized in one of my leagues I have Drake May and Jackson Dart. So I had a good combination going there, and now I got nothing. So I got to look for a quarterback this week. I think I've still. Oh man, I think I would go Darnold because I don't totally trust the Falcons. I think they're in a bit of a free fall mode. Jackson Smith-Njigba is going to have a better game than he had last week, and Atlanta really can't cover him at this point. So I'd barely go for Darnold. I think it's pretty close between him and Caleb Williams for what they can do and what they need to do in these games because of the playoff implications and all that. JJ McCarthy's so hard to trust. I mean, we saw Bo Nix. He did have a very good game overall against the Commanders D. I know it's at home. They got to get Jefferson and Addison and Hawkinson. It's a good matchup for all of them. But I could also see the Vikings say, hey, we're just going to run the ball a lot and try to get out of here without further damage, right? So McCarthy is just so hard to trust. And again, you could just get nothing out of him. I think with Williams and Darnold, you should at least get one touchdown, maybe two, and kind of save your day. But McCarthy just could give you like single digit points at this point in any game.
Yeah, it would be hard to trust McCarthy. I do think he has the biggest ceiling this week if he can put it all together and hit Jefferson, but Darnold would probably be my choice there as well. We're going to move over to tight ends now and get into those rankings for week 14 right after another quick break. The holidays are officially here, which means gift hunting season is on. And if you want something meaningful, personal, and guaranteed to get a reaction, Aura Frames is the gift that delivers every time. It's not just something you wrap, it's a way to share memories. Because Aura isn't your average picture frame, you can preload the frame with photos before gifting it. So when they plug it in, the memories are already there. No apps to figure out, no setup headaches, just instant smiles. You can upload endless amounts of pictures and even 30-second videos. It is the perfect gift for grandparents, parents, newlyweds, really anyone who loves photos. And it's a holiday gift that actually gets used, not forgotten in a drawer. For a limited time, save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com to get $30, $35 off actually, Aura's best-selling Carver matte frames, named #1 by Wirecutter by promo code Locked On at checkout. That's auraframes.com, promo code Locked On. This deal is exclusive to listeners and frames sell it fast. So order yours now to get it on time for the holidays. Support the show by mentioning us at checkout. Terms and conditions apply. All right, let's get into our tight end rankings for week 14. We have the same top 5, slightly different order. Mine goes Trey McBride, #1, Tyler Warren, 2, Dalton Kincaid, 3, Brock Bowers, 4, and Travis Kelce, 5. Your 1 is Brock Bowers, then Trey McBride, Tyler Warren, Dalton Kincaid, and Travis Kelce, also at 5 for you. Trey McBride's just been absolutely killing it. He's averaging so many more points per game than every other tight end. So just keep, you're not even going to question it. Just keep rolling with him at the top there. But if Dalton Kincaid returns, this would be the perfect week for it. And maybe we should even move him up further than where we have him. But he gets the Bengals. He's already a tight end 7 on average this season. He has scored at least 13 fantasy points in half PPR in 4 or 5 home games played this year. 9.3 points in the other home game. And then the Bengals have allowed 6 more points per game in half PPR to tight ends than any other team. He should be a smash play. I hope he's back.
Yeah, based on our recommendations, we've said play the tight end against the Bengals every single week. It's just been different, right? Isaiah Likely still did the damage with Mark Andrews not doing it. And then a couple weeks ago, we had Darnell Washington do it for the Steelers. So when we had those matchups, sometimes it's the multiple tight ends who can do it. And there's still Dawson Knox lingering, right? He could get on the act here, but they've missed Dalton Kincaid. I mean, Khalil Shakir's not cutting it. Keon Coleman shows up once in a while to make a catch in a key situation, but they really need receivers. And this is a game that would be ideal to have him back, get him going in the middle field. And the Bengals actually are not terrible, partly because they're so bad in the middle of the field. They're not so bad against wide receivers. It's not like they're going to be challenged all that much by these receivers, right? So they really need Dalton Kincaid here. Again, Brock Bowers, I mean, he just carved it up last week with his 2 touchdowns. The Broncos are soft in the middle of the field. Trey McBride has a good matchup. Tyler Warren has a good matchup. So I think all these guys could go off this week. But clearly, however you look at it, those are the top 4.
Yep, I am with you. Now, it gets tougher after those guys. I mean, Travis Kelce, he's involved, so you can play him. Bretton Strange, it has a nice matchup against the Colts. I'm a little bit higher on him than you at 11, but he's been involved in that Jaguars offense. But one guy we both are actually high on, and we're going to regret this because we always do. It's Kyle Pitts. We have them both at tight end 7. Exactly. He was heavily involved in the offense last week with Kirk Cousins, 8 targets, 7 receptions, 82 yards. And the Seahawks secondary is legit, right? Even if Drake London ends up coming back, they shut down those wide receivers on the outside. So, well, really just all the wide receivers. They're going to have to use Kyle Pitts over the middle. And the Seahawks have allowed the 5th most points per game to tight ends. It all makes sense, but it's also Kyle Pitts. So who knows? He could put up 20 yards.
Yeah, Kyle Pitts is like the Michael Corleone here. Every time we want to get out, he pulls us back in with a game that fools us every time. Like, we're going to fall for this one. He's probably going to disappoint. But the Seahawks are really bad against the tight end. They struggle to cover running backs. They struggle to cover tight ends. It should have been a nice game for him a couple weeks ago, right when Drake London got hurt. That didn't quite materialize. But he was definitely the go-to guy over Darnell Mooney and some of these other guys that they out here, David Sills and the like, playing receiver for the Falcons. So when we look at this matchup, the matchup says yes. Keep in mind, we also do not have a big ticket item this week in George Kittle, and Hunter Henry is not in the action either. So you got to slide up some people. There's some committees and things that are messing things up. So you could do a lot worse than Kyle Pitts this week. I think he's up there with the Brenton Strange, Jake Ferguson, Dalton Schultz, some guys that have some reliability here based on their usage for this week and the matchup that they're in. So again, Pitts, let's hope for the best. He's probably not going to score because he doesn't really score, but I could see him catch like 6 balls for like 60 to 80 yards in this game.
And you'd be really happy with that.
Yeah.
I have Kyle Pitts just 1 spot ahead of Jake Ferguson. You have Jake Ferguson 1 spot ahead of Kyle Pitts, but very similar there with us and what we expect to be that high scoring game in Detroit. Now, we also both have Dalton Schultz and Darren Waller in our top 11 tight ends. You have you have Schultz at 9, Waller at 10. I have Schultz at 10 and Waller at 11. So just 1 spot down on each. Schultz gets the Chiefs. Waller gets the Jets. We just saw Pitts have a really nice game against the Jets. Waller came back from that injury for the first time in week 13. Limited snaps, only 46% of snaps. He was closer to 70% in week 6 before getting injured, and he was catching touchdowns like crazy before getting injured. So he's a touchdown or bust type of guy, but still, I think he's playable. And then with Schultz, he's just been so involved in the offense. In 3 of the last 4 games, 11 targets, 9 targets, 8 targets. Again, he's not a touchdown guy. And it seems like the Chiefs is a really tough matchup, but they're not really shut down against them, even though it says it's the 6th fewest points per game to tight ends. They've allowed big games to both Dalton Schultz and Sam Laporta this season, haven't played many other great tight ends. So they're not shut down. Schultz can get it done.
Yeah, Schultz, basically they've streamlined their offense, was what we want, right? It's basically 3 guys now in the passing game, which is ideal for every team when we're looking for fantasy. It helps us break things down. But Nico Collins, Jaden Higgins, and Dalton Schultz is pretty much the passing game that is going forward that's most consistent for the Texans. So that's an easy thing to break down. We know the Dolphins don't have much else without Tyreek Hill. It's down to Jen Wall, Devin Achane, and then the last time Darren Waller saw the field against the Jets, he had a couple of touchdowns in that game. So you'll take 1. You don't need 2. You'll take 1 here to pay off as a top 12 tight end this week.
Now, Colston Loveland is a guy that we're pretty different on too. I have him at 9. You have him at 17. We knew last week would be a tough matchup for him against the Eagles, and it was. He only scored 4 fantasy points, but I do expect him to bounce back. The Packers matchup, it looks just middle of the pack right now, but they really haven't faced very many good tight ends. They faced 4 good fantasy tight ends this year: Trey McBride, Zach Ertz, Jake Ferguson, and Sam Laporta. And each of those guys scored at least 11 fantasy points in half PPR. with McBride at 24, Ertz at 15, Ferguson at 14, and Laporta at 11. So they're not too scary of a defense for me against tight ends. I think you can play them. And then one guy you're a bit higher on than me is Harold Fannin Jr. You have him at tight end 8 versus the Titans. I don't have him too low. What do I have him at? 14, I believe. I like him. It's just hard to trust this Browns offense.
Yeah, with Colston Loveland, I'm just a little bit worried about, again, Cole Kmet is not going away from his usage, and all the three, I guess you can say there are 4 receivers involved for the most part, with Romadinze, DJ Moore, and Luther Burden III, and Olamide Zaccheaus. There's just so many mouths to feed, even more than we expected with the Bears. They don't always funnel the ball to him, so that's my one concern with him. But Harold Fannin, I did notice he has a pretty good downfield chemistry with Shedeur Sanders. And look, he's a hybrid, right? The Titans, when you look at it on paper, they don't allow a lot to tight ends, but they don't use Harold Fannin as the straight up traditional tight end. They like to stretch the field with him, make some big plays and downfield. So he's kind of a little bit wide receiver, a little bit tight end here for what they're doing with Shedeur Sanders. I don't think he's going to throw a lot. I think Quinshon Judkins can do most of the damage here, but that should open up some throws downfield to the tight end. And Fannin can make a couple big catches. He has a good chance to score in any game. He's athletic to burst into the end zone. So I'm excited about Fannin in year 2. I think they need to move on a little bit. Maybe Sanders is the quarterback. They need to let David Njoku kind of settle back into a blocking role. But I think Fannin could be special in this offense going forward. And we'll see if that chemistry with Sanders continues to grow here. But I love him this week.
And then 2 guys we really don't like, Mark Andrews and Oronde Gadsden. Gadsden just has a really, really tough matchup and has not been putting up the production he was earlier in the year when he started to catch fire. And then with Mark Andrews, I mean, he had the Bengals last week and still could only score 6 fantasy points because Isaiah Likely got everything. It's just, unless he gets a touchdown, he is a complete bust. And it's just too risky. Now, the Steelers have allowed 7 receiving touchdowns to tight ends this year, tied for 3rd most. So maybe he gets one. And if you want to risk it playing him just for a touchdown, you can do that. But I would prefer to play Isaiah Likely if you had to go with one, because I just can't imagine the Steelers are able to guard him whatsoever.
Yeah, Isaiah Likely for sure. I like him this week. Again, I am very shocked with your quarterback struggling, with Mark Andrews not doing much, Zay Flowers looking iffy, Rashad Bateman being hurt. Why Likely has not been a big part of this offense this year, and he stayed healthy, right? I mean, I don't get it. I don't quite get it, because last year he was playing well, then he got hurt, and he came back. He is a special guy, to kind of like their version of Harold Fannin Jr., like a hybrid there. So we'll see. I want the Ravens offense to fix itself a little bit, because right now it's basically, you can only hope for Derrick Henry touchdown on this team. Otherwise, it's a total wash. So maybe Likely will help Lamar get going, and that's our hope.
Yep. That is it for today's episode. I want to thank you all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen of the day. For your second listen, get a double dose of the Locked On NFL podcast with Tyler the Madman Rowland, who gives you a shot of espresso to start your football day. And Tony Wiggins takes you into the barber shop for the smoothest breakdowns to end the day. I'm on the Thursday morning shows with Tyler if you want more of me talking about the NFL. Find Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We'll talk to you tomorrow when we get into our running back rankings. Bye, y'all.